The light was slowly fading on the horizon, swallowed by clouds that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Amidst the trash, two bodies dragged themselves across the filthy ground, their trembling hands searching for support where there was nothing but debris. The wind carried a sour smell, mixed with something that hinted at abandonment. She tried to hold his hand. He tried not to let go. And in the silence between them, there was a question no one wanted to ask. How had they ended up here? Before we dive into this story, feel free to leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and let us know which city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The massive landfill stretched like a dead ocean. It wasn't a place, it was an end. Mountains of torn bags, carcasses of old appliances, pieces of furniture that once had stories. Everything there had been discarded. Everything there had ceased to matter. And amidst it all, tossed out like just another piece of junk, were they? Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Henderson. Two bodies that no longer fully obeyed. Two lives that insisted on continuing even when the world said it was time to stop. His wheelchair lay overturned a few feet ahead, the wheel still spinning slowly, as if disbelieving what had happened. Hers was farther away, with a broken wheel, sunken into a hole filled with dirty water. They had been yanked from them in a hurry, carelessly, like someone getting rid of a burden they no longer wanted to carry. She tried to stand up. She couldn't. Her body ached in places she didn't even know existed. The ground was wet, cold, and clung to her skin. There were cuts on her arms, scratches on her face. She turned her head slowly, looking for him. He was there, a few steps away, also fallen, also bleeding. His eyes were open, fixed on the grey sky. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. He took a moment to respond. When he did, it was just a movement of his head. Yes. No. Maybe. She couldn't tell. The wind was blowing stronger now, carrying pieces of plastic that flew low, brushing the ground. One passed close to her face, and she smelled the stench of decay. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, tried not to think, but it was impossible not to think, impossible not to remember. Their son, his face when he turned his back, the coldness in his eyes, the way he pushed her wheelchair to the edge of the pickup truck and simply dropped it, without a word, without looking back, as if he were discarding an old piece of furniture, a broken refrigerator, something no longer good for anything. Mrs. Henderson felt something warm run down her face. It wasn't blood, it was a tear, and it came mixed with anger, with shame, with a pain that had no name. "He didn't come back," she said, more to herself than to him. "He won't," Mr. Henderson replied, his voice deep, tired. "We know that." She swallowed hard. She wanted to disagree. She wanted to believe there was some mistake, that their son would realize his error, that he would turn around and come get them. But she didn't believe it. Deep down, from the moment he walked into their house that morning with that strange look, she already knew. She already felt it. The way he said they were going for a drive. The way he didn't look her in the eye. The way he rushed everything, not letting them say goodbye to anything. They had raised that boy. They had given everything, worked their fingers to the bone, sacrificed dreams, rest, peace, all for him. And now they were here, abandoned in the trash, as if they had never mattered. Mr. Henderson stirred slowly, trying to drag his body. He managed to turn onto his side, then propped himself on his elbow. His breathing was difficult, his chest rising and falling with effort. He looked at her, and in his eyes, she recognized something: surrender. "No," she said, her voice firm now, cutting through the air. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Give up." He almost laughed, almost, but he didn't even have the strength for that. "And what are we going to do, woman? Look at us. Look where we are." She looked. She saw his hands stained with blood. She saw his thin, hunched body trembling with cold. She saw the overturned wheelchair, the trash all around, the sky closing in. And yet, something inside her refused to accept that this was the end. "We're going to survive," she said. He stared at her. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Only the wind, only the rustling of the trash, only the distant sound of something that could be a dog or a person or just another noise from that godforsaken place. Then he extended his hand, slowly, trembling, and she took it. Her fingers, cold and rough, found his, and in that touch there was a silent promise. If they were going to die, it wouldn't be without a fight. Night truly began to fall. The light faded quickly, and with it the temperature plummeted. The cold was the bone-chilling kind, the kind that made every breath hurt. Mrs. Henderson tried to drag herself closer to him, seeking warmth. He did the same. They lay there, huddled against each other, two old bodies trying to protect themselves from the world. It was then that she felt it, something hard under her arm. It wasn't ordinary trash, it had weight, it had shape. She turned her head, trying to see better in the growing darkness. There was something there, half buried in the ground, covered by torn bags and pieces of wet cardboard. "There's something here," she said. "Leave it." "No, there's something different." She began to dig with her free hand, pushing aside the trash. Mr. Henderson, though reluctant, helped with his foot, nudging the bags away. Slowly the object appeared. It was a box, metal, rusty at the edges but strangely intact. It looked out of place there, as if it didn't belong in that sea of refuse. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know, but it's not ordinary trash." She picked up the box with both hands, feeling its weight. It was sealed. It had an old but sturdy clasp. She tried to open it. She couldn't. She passed it to him. Mr. Henderson held the box, turned it over, looking for a way to open it. The clasp was jammed. It needed strength, tools, something they didn't have. But they had time. They had all night. And they had, even if almost extinguished, a flicker of hope. They worked in silence, trying different methods, banging the box against a rock, using a rusty piece of metal as a lever. Their fingers ached, their backs ached, everything ached. But they continued, because it was that or surrender, and surrender meant dying there in that god-forsaken place. As they tried, sounds began to emerge around them, shuffling footsteps, distant voices. There were more people there, people who lived in the landfill, people who fought over every scrap of metal, every bottle, everything that might be worth a few cents. Mrs. Henderson looked to the side and saw a shadow moving among the mountains of debris. It was thin, it walked hunched over. It seemed more like a ghost than a person. "There are people here," she whispered. "I know. Be quiet." They huddled closer, trying not to draw attention. The box was hidden between them, protected by their own bodies. The shadow passed close, so close they could hear the ragged breathing. But it didn't stop. It continued, dragging a bag full of cans. Only when the sound disappeared did they breathe again. "We need to get out of here," Mr. Henderson said. "But first we need to open this damned box." "Why? There might be nothing inside. Or there might be everything." She understood what he meant. At that moment, that box was the only thing between them and absolute nothingness. It was the only reason to keep trying, so they returned to work. With more force, with more desperation, and finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the clasp gave way. The metal screeched loudly, echoing in the night silence. The lid came loose. Mrs. Henderson trembled as the lid opened. Not from cold, from something else, from anticipation mixed with fear. Mr. Henderson held the box firmly, brought it close to his face, trying to see in the darkness. The moon was hidden behind the clouds, but gradually their eyes adjusted. and what they saw left them speechless. Inside the box, carefully arranged, were stacks of money. Not a lot, but enough. They were tied with an old rubber band, some crumpled, others surprisingly clean, and with them, wrapped in thick, clear plastic, were documents. Old papers, yellowed at the edges, but protected, and a small rectangular object that glowed faintly under the little remaining light. "Oh my God," she whispered. He said nothing, just looked. He took the bills carefully, as if they might disintegrate in his hands. They were real money. It wasn't a fortune, but at that moment, in that place, it was worth more than all the riches in the world. "How much do you think is there?" she asked. He counted slowly. His hands trembled so much he had to restart twice. In the end, it was a few $100. For most people, it was little. For them, it was the difference between dying and living another day. Mrs. Henderson took the documents. She tried to read, but it was too dark. She put them in the pocket of her torn blouse, along with the bills. Then she picked up the small object. It was a communication device. Old. A model she didn't even know still existed. It had buttons, a small antenna, a blank screen. It seemed intact. "Do you think it works?" she asked. "I don't know. But if it does—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Both knew what that meant. A way to call for help. A way to communicate with the outside world. A way to no longer be completely alone. The night slowly advanced, heavy. They stayed there, clutching the box, protecting it as if it were their very lives. They slept in shifts, if that could even be called sleeping, more like short naps, interrupted by noises, by cold, by pain. When the first light of morning began to brighten the sky, Mrs. Henderson woke her husband. "We need to get out of here," she said, "before someone sees what we have." He agreed. But where to go? They could barely walk. Their wheelchairs were destroyed, and the desert of trash stretched in all directions, seemingly endless. It was then they heard it. A sound of footsteps, light, quick, someone approaching. Mrs. Henderson hid the box under her blouse, hugged her body to conceal the bulk. Mr. Henderson tensed, prepared for anything, though he knew he didn't have the strength to fight. The figure that appeared wasn't threatening. It was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 13 or 14, too thin, dirty clothes torn at the knees, bare feet. He carried a bag on his back full of crushed cans. His eyes were large, curious, but there was also a suspicion in them, a hardness that shouldn't be in such young eyes. "Are you guys okay?" the boy asked, stopping a few feet away. "We're alive," Mr. Henderson replied. The boy took a few steps forward, examined the two old people fallen on the ground, the overturned wheelchairs, the dried blood on their arms. "Did someone throw you here?" "It was our son," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice bitter. The boy didn't seem surprised, as if it were common, as if betrayal was just another normal thing in the world. "Do you have anything valuable?" he asked. They looked at each other. It was a dangerous question. Answering yes could mean losing everything. Answering no could mean losing their only chance for help. "Why do you want to know?" Mr. Henderson asked. The boy shrugged. "Because if you do, I can help. If not, I better go. I don't have time for charity." Mrs. Henderson took a deep breath, looked at her husband. He nodded slowly. Then she took the box from inside her blouse, opened it just a crack, showed a few bills. Enough to prove they had something, not enough to spark greed. The boy's eyes brightened, but not with malice, with interest, with possibility. "How much will you give me to help?" "Depends on the help," Mr. Henderson said. "There's a place nearby, a shack, empty. Nobody uses it. I can take you there, give you some water, food if I find any, and I can teach you how to get by here. And how much do you want for that?" The boy thought for a moment. "Half of what you have in there." "A third," Mrs. Henderson counter-proposed. The boy smiled, a thin smile, but genuine. Deal. And so began an unlikely alliance. Sammy, as they came to call him, helped the two old people to stand up. It wasn't easy. Their bodies were stiff, sore, but with support, little by little, they managed to get on their feet. He picked up the wheelchairs, tried to fix what he could. One of them started working again a bit, crooked, but it worked. The other was lost. So he found a piece of wood, fashioned it into an improvised cane for Mr. Henderson. They walked slowly, very slowly. The sun was already high when they reached the shack. It was exactly as the boy had described. Old, made of rusty metal sheets, torn tarp serving as a roof. But it was standing, and it had 4 walls, and that at that moment was a palace. Inside, the smell was of mold and dust, but it was dry. There was an old mattress in the corner, dirty but usable, some. Wooden boxes serving as furniture. A plastic bottle filled with murky water. Sammy picked up the bottle, offered it to her first, then to him. They drank as if they had never tasted water before. "I'm going to find more stuff," the boy said. "You two stay here. Don't go out and don't open the door for anyone." He left quickly, carrying his bag of cans. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson were left alone. They sat on the mattress, leaning against the cold wall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just breathed, just felt relief at no longer being out in the open. Then Mrs. Henderson took the documents. She opened the plastic carefully. There was enough light now to read. They were old papers, but well preserved. Contracts, receipts, records of transfers, and names. Many names, but none of them familiar. They weren't their documents. They belonged to other people. "What is this?" Mr. Henderson asked, reading over her shoulder. "I don't know. It looks like fraud." She continued reading. Little by little, she understood. These were records of scams, people who had been deceived, mostly seniors, vulnerable people. There were descriptions of how the scams worked: false promises, forged documents, diverted inheritances, and in each case a pattern, a modus operandi that was always the same, and it was terrifyingly similar to what their son had done. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He wasn't the only one." Mr. Henderson took the papers, read them more carefully. His stomach churned. It wasn't just their son who had abandoned his parents. It wasn't just him who had stolen, deceived, discarded. There were others, many others, a network, an operation. And somehow those documents had ended up there, in that desert of trash, inside that box. "Who put this here?" he asked. "Someone who was also deceived, perhaps, someone who was planning revenge." They sat in silence, processing. Then Mr. Henderson picked up the communication device. He examined it. It had battery power. The buttons responded. He pressed one. The small screen lit up, faint, but it lit up. It showed a signal, low but present. "It works," he said, his voice full of surprise. "Now what? Now we use this. We contact someone, we report them. What if no one believes us? We have the evidence. It's all here, names, dates, amounts, everything." Sammy returned in. The evening, bringing provisions. Stale bread, but edible. A dented can of sardines, more water, this time a bit cleaner, and clothes. They weren't new, but they were better than the rags the two old people were wearing. He placed everything on the ground, in the center of the shack, like someone making an offering. "I found all this," he said with a quiet pride in his voice. Mrs. Henderson felt her eyes well up. It had been so long since anyone had done anything for them, so long since anyone had cared. She took the boy's hand, squeezed it, lightly. "Thank you," she said, and the word came out laden with everything she couldn't express. They ate in silence. Every bite was a blessing. Every sip of water, a small miracle. The bread was hard, but they softened it in the water, and it tasted good. The sardines tasted of salt and life. When they finished, Mrs. Henderson saved a piece of bread for later, because in that place you never knew when the next meal would be. Sammy sat with them, his legs crossed on the dirt floor. He looked at the box that was still there, now empty of money, but full of papers. "What's all this?" he asked. Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Henderson looked at each other. Deciding to trust was difficult. But the boy had helped. He had kept his word. And more than that, in his eyes was something they recognized, the mark of someone who had also been hurt by life. "It's evidence," Mr. Henderson said. "Evidence that there are people harming others. Seniors, people like us." The boy frowned. "Like a scam?" "Exactly. And what are you going to do with it?" Mrs. Henderson took a deep breath. "We're going to report it. We're going to get justice." Sammy let out a short, joyless laugh. "Justice? You think anyone cares about two old people dumped in a landfill? About a kid scavenger? Nobody cares about us. We don't exist to the outside world." "But we do exist," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice firm. "And this evidence exists, and the truth exists." The boy was quiet for a while. Then he looked at her, and in his eyes there was something different. Respect, perhaps, or hope, or both. "Okay, and how are you going to do that? You don't even have a phone." Mr. Henderson picked up the communication device, showed it to the boy. "We have this." Sammy's eyes widened. "You know how this thing works?" "More or less. I used one like it years ago, before everything went bad." "And there's a signal here?" "There is. Weak, but it's there." The boy took the device, examined it, pressed some buttons. The screen flickered. He fiddled with the antenna, adjusted it. The signal increased slightly. "You need a number," he said. "Someone who can help." "We need the police, or an attorney, or someone who handles cases like this." "I know. Someone," the boy said slowly. The two old people looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "There's a woman. Dr. Eleanor Vance, we call her. She comes here sometimes, brings medicine, helps those who are sick. She's an attorney, I think, or a social worker, something like that. She helps people." "And you have her number?" "No, but I know where she sets up. She has a van. She parks near the landfill entrance every Saturday morning." "What day is today?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Thursday. 2 days from now." 2 days. It seemed like an eternity, and at the same time nothing. 2 days to hide, to prepare, to not give up. "We wait," Mr. Henderson said, and so they did. The next 2 days were a lesson in survival. Sammy taught them everything he knew, how to get cleaner water by filtering it through a cloth, how to tell which food scraps were still safe, how to hide when other people passed by, how not to attract attention. But more than that, he offered companionship. At night, when the cold intensified and the noises of the landfill grew more frightening, he stayed with them, telling stories. Stories about himself, how he had ended up there, how his mother had died, how his father had disappeared, how he learned that to survive you had to be strong, smart, and never fully trust anyone. "But I trust you too," he said on the second night, his voice low, almost embarrassed. "I don't know why, but I do." Mrs. Henderson ran her hand through the boy's dirty hair, a maternal gesture she hadn't made in so long. "We trust you too." Meanwhile, they continued studying the documents, noting names, trying to understand the connections, and the more they read, the clearer. It became that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was an organization. Several people were involved, and somewhere in those papers there was a mention of something larger. A bank account, an address, something that connected everything. Mr. Henderson spent hours trying to get the device to work better. He discovered that if he climbed to a specific corner of the shack, the signal became stronger. He discovered that the device had a messaging function in addition to calling. and he discovered it still had some credit, not much, but enough for 1 or 2 communications. On Saturday morning, they woke before the sun rose. Sammy had gone out early to check if the van was there. He came running back, his eyes shining. "She's there. Dr. Vance. Her van just arrived." "What do we do?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "We can't get there." "I'll go," the boy said. "I'll talk to her. Bring her here." "What if she doesn't believe you?" "She will. I'll make her believe." He left quickly, taking only one of the documents, the most important one, hidden inside his shirt. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson waited. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound was a fright. Every movement outside was a threat. And then they heard it, voices, 2 of them, the boy's and another, feminine. They braced themselves. The shack door opened slowly. Sammy entered first, then she came in, Dr. Vance. She was a woman in her 40s, hair tied in a ponytail, simple but clean clothes. She carried a briefcase. In her eyes there was tiredness, but also determination. She looked at the 2 old people, assessed the situation in seconds. Then she knelt in front of them. "Tell me everything," she said, and they told her from the beginning, from the son who appeared with that strange look, from the moment they were dumped there, from the box, the documents, everything. Dr. Vance listened in silence, sometimes jotting something down in a small notebook she took from her briefcase. When they finished, she took the documents, read them carefully. "Oh my God," she whispered after a long moment. "I know some of these names. These are cases we could never solve, families who reported, but there was never enough evidence." "And now there is," Mr. Henderson said. "Now there is," she agreed, "but it won't be easy. These people are dangerous, and if they find out you have this, they already found out." The silence that followed was heavy. Dr. Vance looked at them, confused. "What do you mean?" "Our son. He's part of this, and if he threw us here, it's because he knew we might find something, or because he wanted us dead." "And he won't stop," Mrs. Henderson added. "When he finds out we're alive, he'll send someone." Dr. Vance closed her eyes for a moment, thinking. Then she opened her briefcase, took out a phone. "I'm going to call the authorities, my contact who works with these cases. But in the meantime, you can't stay here. You need a safe place." "There's no safe place in the landfill," Sammy said. "Then you're leaving the landfill." She made the call, spoke softly, quickly, explaining the situation. On the other end of the line, someone asked questions. She answered, looking at the documents. Then she hung up. "They're sending someone. But it will take a few hours. Until then, you're coming with me. There's room in the van. It's not comfortable, but it's safer than here." "What about the boy?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "He's coming too." Sammy broke into a smile, a real smile, full of relief and gratitude. They were starting to gather their things when they heard it. An engine, too close, approaching too fast. Dr. Vance looked through the crack in the door and turned pale. "It's a pickup truck, coming straight for us. We need to leave, now." The panic came fast, sharp as glass. Dr. Vance grabbed her briefcase, stuffing the documents inside in a hurry. Sammy ran to the back door of the shack, the one almost no one knew existed, just an opening barely covered by old tarp. Mr. Henderson tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. Mrs. Henderson held his arm, tried to help, but her own body trembled so much she could barely stand. "Let's go!" Dr. Vance practically dragged them as the sound of the engine grew closer and closer. "Through the back door, quick!" Sammy had already cleared a path. Outside, there was a huge pile of trash bags. They could hide there, at least for a few minutes. Dr. Vance helped Mr. Henderson through the opening, then Mrs. Henderson. They dove behind the bags, the putrid smell engulfing everything. The boy quickly covered the opening back with the tarp and dove in with them. The pickup truck stopped in front of the shack. Engine off. Silence. Then heavy footsteps. Boots on the dirt ground. Someone kicked the front door. The old wood gave easily. More footsteps. Inside the shack now. Mrs. Henderson held her breath. Beside her, Mr. Henderson did the same. Sammy was tense, all his muscles ready to run or fight. Dr. Vance held the briefcase against her chest, her fingers white from gripping so hard. "Nobody's here," a gruff voice said, coming from inside the shack. It was a man's voice, a voice that wasn't in a hurry, a voice accustomed to doing what it wanted without fear of consequence. "Look harder," another voice replied, younger, more nervous. "The boss said they were here. The old folks. There has to be a sign of them." The enforcer. That's what Mrs. Henderson imagined the owner of that first voice to be. The enforcer, sent by their son, sent to finish what he had started. Her stomach churned. She felt hatred, such a great hatred that it almost hurt physically. Inside the shack, things were being thrown around, boxes falling, the mattress being kicked. They were searching, and they would eventually find the back door. It was only a matter of time. "We need to get out of here," Dr. Vance whispered, so low it was barely audible. "Now." "Where to?" Sammy whispered back. "My van. It's a couple 100 yards from here, if we can get there without being seen." "They'll see us," Mr. Henderson said, his voice hoarse with contained desperation. "Not if we create a diversion." Sammy understood before the others. He picked up an empty bottle from the trash, then a rusty piece of metal. He looked at Dr. Vance. "I'll create the diversion. You guys run." "No," Mrs. Henderson held the boy's arm. "It's dangerous. I know how to run. I know how to hide. They won't catch me, but you can't run. You need time." Dr. Vance looked at the boy. She saw the determination there, and knew she had no choice. "All right, but be careful, very careful." The boy smiled, that same thin smile from before. Then he crawled out from between the trash bags, silent as a cat. He reached a safe distance. He took the piece of metal and hit the bottle. The sound echoed loudly, coming from far away. Inside the shack, the footsteps stopped. "What was that?" asked the younger voice. "It came from over there," the enforcer replied. "Let's go." Footsteps leaving the shack, running in the direction of the noise. Sammy made the sound again, farther away now, luring them. Dr. Vance took advantage. She held Mr. Henderson by one arm, Mrs. Henderson by the other, and began to walk. Fast. As fast as they could manage. It wasn't running, but it was more than walking. It was surviving. Behind them, more noise. Sammy was keeping the men occupied. But for how long? The van was right there. White, old, with NGO stickers on the side. Dr. Vance opened the back door, practically threw the two old people inside. Then she ran around, got in the front, started the engine. "What about the boy?" Mrs. Henderson was desperate. "We can't leave him. He knows what he's doing. He'll show up. Trust him." But Mrs. Henderson didn't trust. Not when it came to leaving someone behind. Not again. Not after everything. She opened the back door, was about to get out, but Mr. Henderson stopped her. "Wait, look." Sammy was coming, running, faster than seemed possible for someone so thin. Behind him, about 50 yards away, the two men, also running. But the boy was faster, more agile. He knew the terrain. He reached the van, jumped inside, fell to the floor, gasping. Dr. Vance floored it. The van jolted, skidded on the loose dirt, but picked up speed. The men tried to follow, but on foot they had no chance. In seconds, they were left behind. Inside the van, silence. Only the sound of the engine and everyone's heavy breathing. Sammy lay on the floor, his hands on his chest, trying to normalize his breathing. Mrs. Henderson knelt down, ran her hand over his face, pushed back his sweat-matted hair. "You're crazy," she said. But she was smiling. "I am," he replied, also smiling. Dr. Vance drove fast, leaving the landfill, entering the streets on the outskirts of the city. She checked the rearview mirror every few seconds, verifying if they were being followed. They weren't. At least, not yet. "Where are we going?" Mr. Henderson asked. "To the shelter. It's a safe place. It has security guards, cameras. They won't be able to get in. And after that, we'll truly activate the authorities. With this evidence, with your testimony, we can bring down this entire network." Mrs. Henderson looked out the window. The city rushed by. Old buildings, graffiti-covered walls, people on the sidewalk, living their lives, unaware that inside that van were people fleeing death. It was strange. The world kept spinning, indifferent to the terror they had just lived through. "Do you think our son—" she began, but her voice failed. "That he what?" Mr. Henderson asked softly. "That he'll pay for what he did?" Mr. Henderson didn't answer immediately. He looked at his own hands, old, stained, trembling. Hands that had worked all their lives, that had held that boy when he was a baby, that had given everything for him. "I don't know," he said finally, "but we're going to try. It's all we can do." The shelter was located in a more central part of the city. It was a small two-story building with bars on the windows but flowers at the entrance. Inside, there was a smell of soap and food, the smell of cleanliness, the smell of care. Dr. Vance took the three of them straight to a room on the upper floor. It had beds, clean sheets, a bathroom with hot water. "Rest," she said. "I'll make the necessary calls. The authorities will want to speak with you later today. Prepare yourselves." When she left, the three stood there, almost disbelieving. Sammy was the first to move. He went to a bed, lay down, sank into the soft mattress. He closed his eyes. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice muffled by the pillow. "It is," Mrs. Henderson said, also sitting on a bed. "It's real." Mr. Henderson went to the window, looked outside. The street was full of people, normal life. Routine. He thought about their son. Where would he be now? Knowing his parents had survived, knowing the evidence was in the hands of those who could use it, he wondered if their son felt anything. Remorse, fear, regret, or if it was just anger at having failed. The door opened again. Dr. Vance returned, but she wasn't alone. With her were two men in suits. One of them carried a briefcase, the other a recorder. They were from the authorities, detectives. They entered, introduced themselves, shook the three's hands respectfully. "You are courageous," said one of them, the older, man with grey hair. "Very courageous, and this evidence you obtained, it's pure gold. With it, we can shut down this entire operation for good." "How long will it take?" Mr. Henderson asked. "A few days, maybe a week, but it will happen. You can be sure of that." The following days were a mix of fear and hope. The shelter was safe, but the feeling of being hunted didn't disappear. Mrs. Henderson would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, imagining she heard footsteps in the hallway. Mr. Henderson slept little, always alert, his eyes darting to the door at every sound. Sammy, accustomed to living in constant danger, adapted best, but even he jumped when someone suddenly knocked on the door. The authorities worked fast. They took the documents, digitized everything, cross-referenced information. They discovered that the network was even larger than they had imagined. It wasn't just seniors, it was also people with disabilities, lonely individuals, vulnerable people of all types. And the scheme was always the same: gain trust, take control of assets, discard the person when they were no longer useful. The investigators returned several times. They asked questions, recorded testimonies, asked for details Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson didn't even know they remembered. Each conversation was painful, reliving the betrayal, describing the abandonment, admitting that their own son had been capable of such a thing. But they continued, because every word was a piece in building justice. On the fifth day, Dr. Vance entered the room where the three were. She carried a newspaper in her hand. She opened it to the front page. The headline was large, in black letters that screamed, "Police dismantle elderly fraud ring." There were photos of people being arrested, and among them, a photo that made Mrs. Henderson's heart stop. It was their son, handcuffs on his wrists, head down, being led away by two police officers. The image was slightly blurry, taken from a distance, but it was him. No doubt. The same face she had seen for the last time, looking back, cold, leaving them at the landfill. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared. Mr. Henderson approached, placed his hand on her shoulder. He also looked at the photo. Also remained silent. Sammy read the article aloud. The operation, which lasted 3 days, resulted in the arrest of 15 individuals involved in a scheme that defrauded dozens of families across the state. The victims, mostly elderly with assets, were convinced to transfer property and funds by relatives or close associates who then abandoned them in situations of extreme vulnerability. Investigations began after an anonymous tip provided documents proving the frauds. Anonymous tip, Mr. Henderson murmured. That was us. You saved many people, Dr. Vance said, her voice soft but firm. Not just yourselves, all the victims who were in those documents, and those who were yet to come. But he's my son, Mrs. Henderson finally said, her voice breaking. Even after everything, he's my son. Dr. Vance knelt in front of her, held her hands. I know, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Pain, anger, even love still, all of it together. You don't have to choose just one feeling. Mrs. Henderson nodded. The tears came, but they were different from the tears at the landfill. Those were of despair. These were of relief, of closure, of something ending and another thing, uncertain but possible, beginning. Days turned into weeks. The judicial process began. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson would have to testify. The idea terrified them, seeing their son again, talking about what he had done, but they had no choice, and more than that, they didn't want a choice. They wanted justice. Meanwhile, life at the shelter continued. They met other people. Mrs. Davis, a 75-year-old woman who had been swindled by her own brother. Mr. Johnson, an 80-year-old man, abandoned by his children in a house without water or electricity. Each story was a punch to the gut, each person a mirror of what they had lived through. But there were also moments of lightness. Sammy, who had never had a family, now had one. Mrs. Henderson treated him like a grandson. Mr. Henderson taught him things, how to play checkers, how to read better, how to dream of a future that was more than just survival. And the boy blossomed, laughed more, spoke more, dreamed more. When I grow up, he said one afternoon sitting in the shelter's garden, I want to help people, like Dr. Vance. I don't want anyone to have to live in the trash like I did. You will, Mrs. Henderson said. I'm sure of it. The day of the trial arrived like a storm. They woke. Early, all nervous. Dr. Vance took them to the courthouse in a different van, newer, with tinted windows. Inside the building there were security guards, reporters trying to get in. The case had become national news. Everyone wanted to know about the old folks who had survived in the landfill and brought down an entire crime syndicate. They entered the courtroom. It was large, cold, with a high ceiling and dark wooden benches. In the back, behind a glass partition, were the defendants, 15 people, men and women of various ages, and in the middle of them, their son. Mrs. Henderson saw him before he saw her. He was in an orange prison jumpsuit. His face was different, thinner, older. There was a tension there that hadn't existed before. When he finally looked up and saw her, his eyes widened. For a second, something crossed his face. Surprise, perhaps fear, perhaps something that looked like regret. But it passed quickly. The trial lasted hours. Witnesses were called, documents were presented, experts explained the scheme, and then it was their turn. Mrs. Henderson went first. She ascended to the witness stand, swore to tell the truth, and she told it. She told everything. The room fell silent. Not even breathing could be heard. She spoke about the life they had built, about the sacrifice of raising a child, about the day he appeared with that strange look, about the trip to the landfill, about being thrown on the ground like trash, about almost dying, about finding the strength to survive. When she finished, there were tears in the eyes of several people in the room. The judge was serious, taking notes. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied, and their son looked at the floor, unable to face her. Mr. Henderson was next. His testimony was shorter, more objective, but no less powerful. He spoke about what it was like to be discarded, about what it was like to look at his son and see a stranger, about what it was like to have to choose between dying and fighting, and choosing to fight even without knowing if it was worth it. "He is my son," Mr. Henderson said, looking directly at the defendant. "And he always will be. But what he did is unforgivable, not in the justice of men, and perhaps not even in God's." The trial ended late that night. The judge retired to deliberate. The decision would come the next day. They returned to the shelter exhausted. They lay on their beds without even changing clothes. They slept soundly for the first time in weeks. When they woke, Dr. Vance was already there, with news. "All convicted," she said, a tired smile on her face. "Long sentences. Some will spend decades in prison." "And our son?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice barely audible. 15 years, without possibility of parole. He was considered one of the leaders of the operation." Silence. Mrs. Henderson sat on the bed, covered her face with her hands. She didn't cry, she just breathed deeply, trying to process. Mr. Henderson stood beside her, his hand on her back, saying nothing, because there were no words. "You did the right thing," Dr. Vance said. "I know it doesn't feel like it now. I know it hurts. But you saved many lives, and you restored dignity to many people." "I don't feel dignified," Mrs. Henderson said. "I feel tired." "Then rest. Rest because you deserve it. You fought. You won. Now it's time to live again." And so began the next phase. The shelter offered for them to stay as long as they needed. But they didn't want charity. They wanted independence. With Dr. Vance's help, they gained access to benefits they were entitled to but had never received. The money wasn't much, but it was enough. They rented a small apartment, 2 bedrooms, one for them, another for Sammy, who was officially registered under their guardianship. Life slowly restarted, waking up without fear, eating without having to fight for food, sleeping in a clean bed, taking a hot shower. Simple things most people took for granted, but for them, each was a small miracle. The apartment was in a simple neighborhood, with low houses and quiet streets. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. The windows overlooked a courtyard where children played in the afternoons. There was a corner store where the owner knew everyone by name. And there was silence, that good silence of peace, not the frightening silence of the landfill. Mrs. Henderson woke early every day, made coffee, prepared toast with butter, woke Mr. Henderson and Sammy with the smell of warm food. They sat at the table together, the 3 of them like a family. They ate slowly, talked about small things, the weather, the news, the plans for the day. Nothing major, but it was everything. Sammy had started school. Dr. Vance secured him a spot in a local public school nearby. At first, it was difficult. He couldn't read well. He didn't understand numbers. The other students sometimes laughed at him, asked where he came from, why he was so behind. But he persevered, because now he had a reason. He had people waiting for him at home, people who believed in him. At night, Mrs. Henderson helped him with his homework. She hadn't studied much herself, but she knew enough, and what she didn't know, she'd improvise. The important thing was to be there, to show that someone cared. Mr. Henderson, sitting in the old armchair they had bought at a thrift store, watched the two with a smile at the corner of his mouth. It was a smile of contentment, of something that finally made sense, but not everything was easy. There were bad days, days when Mrs. Henderson woke with a weight in her chest, days when the memory of the landfill returned like a waking nightmare. She saw her son's face, smelled the putrid odor, heard the sound of her wheelchair being overturned, and she would stand still, breathing deeply, trying to return to reality. Mr. Henderson had his own battles. The body aches were constant. The medicine helped, but it didn't take everything away. And there was also the anger, an anger he didn't know where to put, anger at his son, anger at himself for not having realized sooner, anger at the world that allowed such things to happen. One afternoon he was on the apartment balcony, smoking a cigarette he shouldn't have been smoking due to his health, when Dr. Vance appeared. She always visited, brought medicine, checked if everything was all right, but this time she brought something different, a letter. "It's from him," she said, handing him the envelope. Mr. Henderson looked at the letter as if it were a snake. He didn't want to take it. He didn't want to know what was inside, but at the same time, he needed to. He took it slowly, opened it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, or perhaps nervous. It began without a greeting. "I know I don't have the right to write. I know nothing I say will change what I did. But I need you to know I wasn't myself back then. I was involved with the wrong people, debts, threats. I had to get money fast, and you had that house, that property. I thought you wouldn't even notice. I thought you would be in a better place. I know it's a lie. I know I just wanted to justify myself, but I wanted you to know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry every day, every damn day." The letter had no signature. It just stopped, as if he didn't know how to end it, or as if he didn't deserve to put his name. Mr. Henderson read it twice, then folded the letter back, put it in his pocket, looked at Dr. Vance. "Does he want an answer?" "I don't know. I don't think he expects one." "Because he won't get one." Dr. Vance nodded. She understood. Sometimes there was no possible answer. Sometimes silence was the only just thing. But the letter stayed with him, in his pocket, for days. He would take it out sometimes, read it again, tried to feel something other than anger, pity, perhaps, or understanding. But he couldn't. He only felt emptiness, as if the son he had raised had died that day at the landfill, and what remained was a stranger trying to explain himself. Mrs. Henderson knew about the letter. He told her one night, when they were lying down, the room dark, only the sound of the street outside. "He wrote," Mr. Henderson said. "And what did he say?" "That he regrets it, that he had debts, that it wasn't him." Silence. Then, "Do you believe him?" "I don't know. I don't know if it matters." She turned to him, looked at him in the dark. She could only see the outline of his face, but she imagined his expression. "Do you think we should have answered?" "I don't know what we should have done. I only know what we did, and we survived. And that has to be enough." She agreed in silence. Then she moved closer, rested her head on his shoulder, and they stayed like that until sleep came. Months passed. Sammy grew, literally. Eating properly, sleeping properly, he shot up in height. His thin face began to fill out. His smile came easier. He made friends at school. Brought one of them home one day, a boy his age, also from a humble family. They stayed in the room, talking, laughing. Mrs. Henderson prepared snacks, brought them to them. And when she returned to the living room, there were tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Mr. Henderson asked. "Nothing. It's just that he's having a childhood, something he never had, and we gave that to him. We did, and so did he. He chose to trust us. He could have left, but he stayed. And it's a good thing he stayed." There were moments of community, too. They met their neighbors, Mrs. Carol Miller, who lived in the apartment next door and always brought cake on weekends. Mr. Arthur Gomez, who owned an auto repair shop and offered help if they needed it. The family on the second floor with 3 noisy children who made the building feel more alive. They didn't tell anyone the full story, just that they had been through tough times, that they had lost a lot, but that they were rebuilding, and people respected that. They didn't ask too many questions, they just offered companionship, and that was more than enough. Dr. Vance continued visiting. She brought news. Other victims of the syndicate had joined together. They formed a support group. Meetings every week. To talk, to share experiences, to heal together. She invited Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson to participate. They hesitated at first. They didn't want to relive it. They didn't want to dwell on the past. But she insisted. "It's not about being stuck," Dr. Vance said. "It's about breaking free. You're carrying this alone. But there are people who understand, who went through the same thing, and being with them can help. It can show you that you're not just victims, you're survivors." So they went. On a rainy Thursday, in a small church community hall, there were about 15 people there, all more or less the same age, all with similar stories. Sons who stole, grandchildren who deceived, trusted people who betrayed. Each one told their story, and each story was a deep cut. But at the same time it was relief, because they weren't alone. When it was Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson's turn to speak, they hesitated. But then Mr. Henderson began, slowly, pausing. He told about the landfill, about the box, about the boy who helped them, about fighting for justice even when it seemed impossible. And when he finished, there was a respectful silence. Then applause, not of celebration, but of recognition, of respect. After the meeting, several people came to talk. They thanked them for having the courage to report it. They said that because of them, the investigation had grown, that other people had been saved, that families had been protected. And for the first time since everything had begun, Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson felt it had been worth it. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the betrayal. But it gave meaning. They left the church hall hand in hand. The rain had stopped. The sky was clear. There were stars. They walked slowly to the bus stop, waited in silence, and when the bus arrived and they got on, they sat side by the window and looked at the city passing by outside, a city that once seemed an enemy, but that now, little by little, was becoming home again. A year had passed since the day at the landfill. 12 months that felt like a lifetime. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen preparing Sunday lunch. She did this now, every Sunday. She invited people. Dr. Vance always came. Sometimes she brought someone from the support group. Mr. Arthur Gomez and Mrs. Carol Miller came too. And of course Sammy, who now had a real name on his documents but was still called the boy by everyone. The table was set. Clean tablecloth, mismatched but well-washed plates. Simple food but made with care. Rice, beans, roasted chicken, salad, and a cornbread that Mrs. Henderson had learned to make from Mrs. Carol Miller. It wasn't a feast, but it was abundance. It was plenty. It was proof that they had overcome. Mr. Henderson was in the living room helping the boy with schoolwork, math. He had never been good with numbers, but he was trying. And the boy had patience, explained slowly, didn't laugh when he made mistakes. There was respect there. There was love, the kind that doesn't need blood to be true. The doorbell rang. Dr. Vance had arrived. She brought flowers, always brought something. This time, sunflowers, yellow, large, cheerful. Mrs. Henderson put them in an improvised vase, a cut glass bottle. It looked pretty. It gave color to the room. Everyone sat, and down to eat. The conversation flowed easily. Jokes, stories. Mr. Arthur Gomez talked about a client who had driven a car with no brakes and almost crashed. Mrs. Carol Miller spoke of her grandchildren who were growing up too fast. Sammy shared about the English test he had done well on. Dr. Vance updated them on her work, about other people who were being helped. And amidst it all, Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson just listened and smiled. Because that right there, that full table, that happy chatter, that was their victory. It wasn't wealth, it wasn't fame, it was life. It was regained dignity. After lunch, while Dr. Vance and Mrs. Carol Miller helped wash the dishes, Mr. Henderson went out to the balcony, lit a cigarette, looked at the street, and thought. Thought about their son. He still thought about him every day, not with anger anymore. The anger had faded. It had turned into something else, a quiet sadness, an acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed. There was another letter. And another. They never replied. But they read them. Each one was an attempt by their son to explain, to apologize, to seek something he might not even know what it was. Forgiveness, probably, but forgiveness wasn't theirs to give. Not yet. Perhaps never. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Henderson appeared on the balcony, drying her hands with a dishcloth. "I am. Just thinking." "About him?" "Always about him. Can't stop." She came closer, stood beside him. They looked together at the empty street, the clear blue sky, the wind rustling the trees. "Do you think we'll ever be able to forgive him?" she asked. "I don't know. I don't know if we need to. Forgive isn't to forget. And I don't want to forget. Because forgetting would be erasing everything we went through, and we went through that. We survived, and that's important." "It is," she agreed. "It's important." They stayed there a while longer. Then they went back inside, to the room full of people, to the noise, to life. Months continued to pass. Sammy graduated from middle school. It was a small ceremony at the school, but Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Henderson went. They sat in the front row. And when his name was called, and he went up on stage to receive his certificate, they cried. They cried with pride, with happiness, with everything that moment represented. After the ceremony, they took a photo, the three of them together, the boy in the middle, holding his certificate, Mrs. Henderson on one side, Mr. Henderson on the other, all smiling. Then the photo was printed, placed in a cheap frame and hung on the living room wall. It was the first photo they had in their new home, and it was perfect. The boy decided to continue his studies. He wanted to finish high school, then, who knows, college. It seemed like an impossible dream, but he had learned that impossible dreams were sometimes the only ones worth pursuing. Mrs. Henderson started doing crafts. She sold them at a local craft fair near their home on Saturdays. Crocheted items, knitted goods, small things. She didn't earn much, but it was hers, made with her own hands. And people bought them, praised them, and that gave meaning. Mr. Henderson found a part-time job at a local grocery store, organizing stock, nothing strenuous, just enough to feel useful. To have a routine, not to stand idle, thinking too much. They had built a new life from scratch, from the ruins, from literal trash. And it was a good life, not perfect. There were difficult days, there were tight budgets, there were pains that wouldn't go away, but there were also laughs, there were hugs, there was tomorrow. One cold winter night, the three were in the living room. Sammy was doing homework, Mrs. Henderson was crocheting, Mr. Henderson was reading the newspaper, and suddenly, for no apparent reason, he spoke. It was worth it. The other two looked at him. "What?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Everything. Fighting, surviving, it was worth it." She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "It was." Sammy said nothing. He just looked at the two old people who had become his family, and felt gratitude, the kind that fills your chest and cannot be put into words. The years continued. They aged more, became slower, more fragile, But they never gave up. Never again. Because they had learned at rock bottom, amidst the trash, surrounded by death, that life was worth every second, every breath, every sunrise. Their son remained in prison. He served his sentence. Years later, when he was released, he tried to make contact. A different letter, more humble, more broken. He asked to see them, just once, just to apologize face to face. They discussed it, whole nights. Should they? Could they? In the end, they went to a simple, neutral coffee shop, with Dr. Vance accompanying them for support. Their son arrived older, grey hair, deep-set eyes. He seemed to have aged 20 years in 5. He sat across from them and cried like a child, apologized, repeated it 1,000 times, said he understood if they didn't forgive him, that he just wanted them to know he had changed, that he was trying to be better. Mrs. Henderson listened in silence, Mr. Henderson too. When he finished, they didn't embrace. They didn't say everything was all right, because it wasn't, but Mrs. Henderson extended her hand, touched his hand, just a second, a brief touch, and said, "We survived. That's all you need to know." And it was enough. It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was recognition of humanity, of how everyone carries flaws, of how some mistakes can't be undone, but life continues nonetheless. They left the coffee shop. Each went their separate way, and they probably wouldn't see each other again, but it was settled, resolved, not healed, but resolved. Life continued in the small apartment, with the grown boy becoming a man, with the 2 old people growing even older, with Sundays full of people, with laughter, with pain that existed but no longer dominated, with bad memories that had lost their power to hurt so much, with scars that didn't disappear but no longer bled. And on a random spring afternoon, Mrs. Henderson was on the balcony watering the small plants she had started to cultivate. Mr. Henderson was reading. The boy, now a young man, was in his room studying, and she paused, looked at the sky, at the clear blue, at the warm sun, and took a deep breath and felt peace. It wasn't the peace of someone who had never suffered. It was the peace of someone who had suffered and survived, of someone who had fallen and risen, of someone who had been discarded and rebuilt themselves. It was hard-won peace, fought for, deserved, and in that moment, that simple moment of light and good silence, she knew it had been worth it. All the pain, all the fear, all the effort, because in the end, they had gained the only thing that truly mattered. They had gained their life back. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.